Our speaker is Elina Moreno from University of Toronto, Canada. Today, she presents her talk on the topic, Those Who Love Singlehood, How Self-Expansion Fosters Well-Being Beyond Romantic Relationships.
Hello everyone, my name is Elina Moreno and this is my talk entitled Those Who Love Singlehood, How Self-Expansion Fosters Well-Being Beyond Romantic Relationships. So, what is self-expansion? Self-expansion can be parsed into two key principles. The first is a universal motivation that people have to expand their sense of self, and the second is inclusion of other in the self, which is often studied through the lens of romantic partnerships, which are commonly thought of as your closest other and thus considered the prime condition for self-expansion. So, if romantic relationships are so critical for self-expansion, then how might single people who don't have a romantic partner engage in and benefit from self-expansion? We aim to answer these questions by looking at self-expansion in two different ways. The first is singlehood self-expansion potential, which is the belief that a certain scenario, in this case singlehood, provides opportunities to expand one's sense of self. And to measure this, we used a version of the Lewandowski and Ackerman self-expansion potential measure adapted specifically for singlehood. Our example is, I feel that if I were to continue being single, I would be able to gain more insights, experiences, and or knowledge. The second way that we're planning on looking at this question is through self-expanding experiences, the actual experience that people engage in which they expand their sense of self. And to measure this, we used a version of the Lewandowski and Aaron self-expansion measure adapted for singlehood that reads, today, being single allowed me to have new experiences. Specifically, we hypothesized that singlehood self-expansion potential would be associated with singlehood and well-being outcomes, and that this association would occur through engagement in self-expanding experiences. Now, our actual methods, we conducted 3 studies to test these hypotheses. The first one is a 14-day daily diary with an N of 131. The second was a 6-week weekly diary with an N of 180. And the third was a thought experiment with an N of 324. For both diary studies, participants reported on self-expansion potential and singlehood self-expansion potential at baseline, and self-expanding experiences and singlehood and well-being outcomes at the daily and weekly levels. And we also collected qualitative information at the weekly level of study 2. Specifically, we asked participants what the self-expanding experiences they were engaging in were and who they were completing them with. Now, moving on to demographics, across all 3 studies, the majority of the sample was heterosexual, followed by bisexual, asexual, gay, lesbian, pansexual, and another identity not listed. And we also have ethnicity and race distributed as majority white, then Asian, Indian, Black, Middle Eastern, and another identity not listed. Gender was distributed fairly evenly across males and females, with a small proportion of non-binary participants, and our average age was around 27 years old, and the average length of singlehood was about 8 years, with many participants reporting being single for their entire lives, up to around 60 years old. We did not have any minimum criteria for necessary length of singlehood, so as long as participants indicated being actively single at the time of reporting, they were included in our analyses. Our singlehood outcomes included fear of being single, represented by the item, today I felt anxious when I thought about being single forever, and singlehood satisfaction, which an example item is, today being single makes me very happy. And our well-being outcomes were life satisfaction. For example, in most ways, my life is close to ideal. And psychological need fulfillment, which encompasses 3 different facets. Those being autonomy, I felt free to be who I am. Competence, I felt like a competent person. And relatedness, I felt close to those around me. We averaged across all 3 facets to create an overall psychological need fulfillment score. So, what did we find? Across both studies 1 and 2, we found that singlehood self-expansion potential is associated with singlehood and well-being outcomes, and also predicted engagement in singlehood self-expanding experiences across both studies. And those self-expanding experiences predicted singlehood and well-being outcomes across both studies as well. So this means that both greater singlehood self-expansion potential and engagement in self-expanding activities lead to single people being less fearful in being single, more satisfied with their singlehood status, feel greater competence, autonomy, and relatedness, and feel more satisfaction with life. Now, we also wanted to leverage our diary data by testing whether self-expansion potential and self-expanding experiences were associated with next day and next week singlehood and well-being outcomes. Of course, controlling for same day and week outcomes with some lagged analyses. So, we found that singlehood self-expansion potential was associated with next day fear of being single, psychological need fulfillment, and singlehood satisfaction outcomes, and next week, singlehood outcomes. Singlehood self-expansion potential was also associated with engagement in self-expanding experiences across both studies 1 and 2. And those self-expanding experiences were actually negatively associated with next day and next week outcomes, specifically psychological need fulfillment, life satisfaction, and singlehood satisfaction. Now, this may reflect a statistical artifact of return to baseline following same-day benefits from self-expanding experiences, or it may suggest that single people experience lower well-being following self-expanding experiences, potentially due to not interacting with their activity partners continually over time, which would be in contrast to romantic relationships who may savor the benefits of those experiences over time. So, what can we take away from these analyses? Singlehood self-expansion potential is generally associated with concurrent and lagged boosts in singlehood and well-being outcomes. And one way that singlehood self-expansion potential bolsters these outcomes is through engagement in actual self-expanding experiences. And that self-expanding experience may benefit singlehood and well-being outcomes in short, immediate boosts, but not necessarily for the long term. Next, we want to dive deeper into what the actual self-expanding experiences that people were engaging in were, and which close others, if any, were engaging in those activities with them. So, in study 2, we asked participants to describe one self-expanding experience that they engaged in each week for 6 weeks. And we found all of these different kinds of activities. We identified 12 different types of self-expanding experiences that single participants engaged in. The larger words in this word cloud reflect the more commonly reported experiences, and within these categories, participants specified certain activities. So, for example, physical activity encapsulated hiking or going to the gym, whereas holidays and trips could be going to the beach or traveling abroad. And then we also asked who were completing these activities with the single participants. So we found that the most common were friends and family, followed by solo activities. This highlights the importance of social relationships for self-expanding in singlehood. So because there was still a notable amount of participants who completed the activities alone, this suggests evidence consistent with non-relational self-expansion research that does not account for singlehood context and may align with emerging evidence of the benefits of solitude. Also, it may be the case that some activities may be most beneficial when completed alone compared to with a close other, like reading compared to exercise. Our final study was a thought experiment that created 2 randomly assigned self-expansion potential conditions, those being the high self-expansion potential or novel condition and the control or low self-expansion potential or routine condition. All of these measures for study 3 were the same as in study 1 and 2, except because life satisfaction is generally stable we instead investigate positive and negative mood. The mood measure asks to what extent participants feel various emotions. For positive mood, those emotions included amused and interested, and for negative mood, they included guilty and upset. Now, to create those conditions, we instructed participants to consider their life as a single person and list 3 activities that they could complete in the future given their singlehood status. For the routine condition, these activities were instructed to be routine, regular, and or predictable activities that maintain one's current perspectives or experiences. And the novel condition activities were instructed to be novel, exciting, or spontaneous activities that expand one's current perspectives or experiences. Unexpectedly, we did not find evidence of a successful manipulation of self-expansion potential. However, we still found that participants who listed novel, exciting, and spontaneous activities may have experienced a short-term boost in self-expanding experiences and positive mood. We also ran additional analyses to identify which individual differences influence singlehood self-expansion potential beliefs. And we actually found that people who reported being involuntarily single, who desired a committed relationship, who harbored relationship pedestal beliefs, and who were fearful of being single and had lower self-esteem were all predictive of being lower in singlehood self-expansion potential beliefs, so less likely to believe that singlehood would offer them opportunities to self-expand in the future. And what does this all mean? Our research highlights that the singlehood context is a unique opportunity for expanding the self, especially if you love being single. It also recognizes how beliefs about singlehood are critical for singlehood and well-being outcomes. And lastly, we identified that the social relationships, non-romantic social relationships, are important for self-expansion potential. Moving forward, researchers should test the directionality of these associations using experimental and longitudinal methods and investigate alternate priming techniques for self-expansion potential to better help the growing singlehood population. And lastly, I would like to thank my collaborators on this project, Yuthika, Anna, and Sarah, for all of their help. And I would like to thank you for your time. Thank you.